All right, so our next speaker is Matthieu Wyart from EPFL. Thank you.
So I'm really honored to be here in the memory of Sir Edward. And I'm also very excited to tell you about recent ideas on a very old question, the glass conditions of humans beginning with making glasses for 5,000 years, Romans, and windows. But as physicists, we
Can you repeat the advice about how? You need to be within range of this.
Okay.
You can't.
All right. So it's
You're overreacting.
So it's an old problem, but we as a community, we still don't agree actually, even on the basic question of why is it becoming solid? And so I'm excited to do two very recent works, which I think maybe suggest, a new perspective on this question. And it's a collaborative work with Pika Chama in Singapore and the former student and postdoc in Israel mentioned today. That's the first work I will be telling you about. And the second work is with Heidi Tahé, Ozawa Popovic, Biroli, and myself, and this will appear this week or next week. So I have two slides to summarize this field. And so the first aspect is the dynamics. So you take a liquid and you quench it, and you choose a liquid that does not crystallize well, so it doesn't do it. And then you track the dynamics. So it's time scale to alpha. And on shorter time scale, the structure and the stress don't relax. It tends to be a solid. But on larger time scale, it flows. And as you push the system experimentally, you can go from vibrational time scale to minutes. So you can study the alpha for 15 decades. And what you find is that in some liquids, the alpha really suddenly grows as you shift the temperature. And the interpretation is that this time scale is some microscopic fast time scale and the exponential of an activation energy. Kind of barrier you have to break to actually relax the structure over case. And what it means that in some liquids, as you lower the temperature and go down the landscape, you face larger and larger barriers. And so one of the central questions is what do those barriers correspond to? And why do they go? That's the first point. And the second point has to do with the fact that as you cool the system, the dynamic becomes more and more collective. You have dynamical heterogeneity. And that's an example. So what you do here is numerical, but also experiment reporting this. So what you do is you take a snapshot of your liquid, you wait, say, the time half or 2 alpha. And you look which particle have moved. So this is a displacement feature indicating motion. And what you find is that big part of the system, did not relax at all. And other regions were really liquid, so they did relax. And this length scale grows under cooling as the log of this relaxation time, essentially. So it's not very fast, but it grows. And an intriguing aspect of this field that many of us can actually simulate, numerically liquids, but we still don't agree as to actually what the heterogeneity are. Okay, so I'm going to summarize theories of the glass transition in one or a few slides as well. But essentially, there are two big pictures. And one is very popular and very natural. And it is the idea that, the fact that the energy, the exponential energy growth is related to the fact that you have a growing length. The two come hand by hand. So in those pictures, you can move and rearrange a few particles and locally rearrange the structure, but to really relax, you need to break something over the length of time. I will comment on some theories that do that. And the other viewpoint, which is also, very old, starting from pre-volume and so on, saying, no, in fact, a liquid becomes a gas just because local bias, just rearrange a few particles, is actually constant. And our theories also, I will detail some. in this picture, it's not too clear what is the very next step. But the contention of the first part of this book that in some popular models, very broadly political particles, we have direct evidence that this view is correct. That's the contention. Okay, so maybe very briefly, I would mention theory. So one theory is really a mean-field theory of liquids. It's called the random first order theory. And essentially, in a nutshell, the idea that you have some growing order, thermodynamic order that grows as you cool the system. And that you need to break this order to relax. And if you know the energy, you match body states, the whole law of this length scale, and then you have a view where the acceleration energy grows because you have a right axis. But you have completely different models which also share such properties. For example, some of the kinetically constrained models. So in those models, you need that you have defects, and there's some energy U that you assume does not depend on temperature. And so the density depends on temperature. So at large temperature, you have many defects, so it's easier to move. And at low temperature, just like in the first one, you have less and less defects, so motion becomes more complicated. In some of the popular models, like the heat model, for example, the fact that you can nucleate the defect or move the defect in contention depends on having defects. And in models like this as well, you can have an acceleration energy which is much larger than the energy of nucleating or moving the defect. And that's again related to some growing length scale. And then there is this view that no, in fact, it's just everything is just global. It goes in different flavor, but there's one model like that called elastic model of the vast condition. It's saying something so very simple. Just on short time scale, your material is solid. So if you're trying to rearrange a few particles around, you will have to pay some elastic energy, and it's going to be proportional to the shear modulus, to the volume on which you need to rearrange, and to some sort of time scale. And if we assume, and you will see this presentation is not actually not that right, but the volume is shift and is independent of temperature as well as this one. Then you predict that the acceleration energy is just related to the high frequency shear modulus of the liquid. And you are measuring it on very high frequency, and there are correlations. There are good correlations, in fact, with the acceleration energy, and in the liquid for which the acceleration energy grows rapidly are also good for which some different occurs. So the problem is that those different theories make different predictions and predict correlation between quantities, and they all have positive results. So we think we need to go beyond correlation and really try to look for direct evidence that global bias control what's going on. And so that's the first part of the story, that it's about direct evidence. And then the second part is, well, if it's local bias, why do you have a growing length scale? And that will connect maybe to other problems of soft matter. So that's fitting for this conference. And there's a question I will not touch, but would be happy to discuss in discussion is, why are the bias growing? Okay, so part one, we want to measure local bias in glasses. So you have this energy landscape, because the energy depends on the condition of all the particles. And the game we want to be playing is, if you point the system and go to a metastable state, we want to look at the nearest metastable state, so do single jump over bias. And we want to learn the properties of those bias. Okay, so in real space, it works, so that's an example. I'm zooming in a bigger 3D system, which has thousands of particles in color. That corresponds to moving along some coordinate. And here you see also 10 particles are actually moving from one position in blue to another position in red, and it's circling around the bias. Okay. So there have been many studies of the potential energy landscape. What most of them do is they follow the dynamics, and then they track, they have examples of jumping over bias. They try to identify just the time points where you jump, and they consider the bias study. And for example, they find that they do it at high temperature and some at very low temperature for other reasons. And what they tend to find that as you cool down the system, actually, the number of particles that move tends to be reduced to jump over a single barrier, which I will confirm later in scope. But here we want to do something different. We still want to use temperature to probe with the good barriers, but we want to study from one given configuration. We don't want to wander around, we want to study systematically all the barriers coming from one EPFL, or at least a big fraction. Because what we want to compute is the density of state. What is the number of barriers which have a given magnitude barrier given? Okay, so there is one difficulty with this. So how you would proceed is you take your equilibrated liquid, so this is the time and what it would be temperature. So you have an equilibrated system. And then suddenly you crunch it to zero temperature to go to metastatic state. What you could do then is a very small thermal cycle where in average you do nothing, but sometimes you do one little thing and then you study it. This little thing would be jumping around the local barrier of excitation. But the problem is that, and then you could, once you have this guy, you could start again from here and do another thermal cycle to try to discover another one. But obviously the problem that if you do that, you always discover the same. But you trigger are the weakest one in your box, and you don't see the higher energy ones are very rare, and when they occur are hidden by many other events. Okay, and so we have a very simple idea to remove this difficulty. We start with a small cycle of temperature, and maybe we're going to discover this excitation with 3 variables. Then we're going to change the system in a minimal way, such that this excitation cannot be triggered again. So this excitation was sort of double wave. We're going to add the parabolic potential or a spring in only 1 degree of freedom. So you have 1,000 degree of freedom, you generate one in this direction with the minimal stiffness that makes this double wave single wave. So now that you reinforce the system, you can rise the temperature and discover higher energy objects. And then you do it equation. Once you've done it and you have those candidates, you can study them in the absence of any added potential with common methods, string methods, and so on that allow you to, compute this pathway connecting to metastatic. So it's a stochastic algorithm. We call it SEER, systematic excitation extraction, and it's a stochastic algorithm. And so if you just do one run, how systematic are we in detecting bias? Right? Question. And so we don't do just one run. What we do is many runs of this algorithm, and we increase the library of excitation that we have. And what you see in this plot is the density of state, the number of barriers with some energy exactly. And you put log before, sorry for. And what you see here is what happens if I do 10 runs, 20 runs, 30 runs, or 50 runs. And what you see that at low energy, I'm converged. At high energy, no, I still have many to discover. But at low energy, it seems that I'm converging to some converged density of state. So in the rest of the presentation, I tend to focus on that energy scale. The parenthesis is that, as others found as well, if you look at how big those objects are, that the volume coefficient of the participation ratio as a function of temperature, and I'm not going to tell you what these two colors are, but the volume is actually decreasing. The volume of the excitation is decreasing. So it's not like the guys are very big, trying out. Okay, we have some ideas as ways like that, but I'm not going to discuss that today. Okay, so here comes the 2 important slides. So the different colors is the energy of the excitation, and here I'm looking at the cumulative density of state, so the number of barriers that have energy smaller than it. And I look at it at various temperature. And so this is large temperature and it is very low temperature. We use 12 to equilibrate even more than And there's something that makes sense. If you have a very stable, system that you equilibrated with very low temperature for quenching it is more stable, it has less of the fire. But the remarkable result is that essentially those density of states are just the same shifted by some energy. Okay, so I can just collapse them with very good approximation, just by shifting them. What it means is that what's happening would be equivalent to increasing the energy of all barriers by some amount. This amount, I will call it delta T. Okay, so we take some reference, and then these barriers are shifted by delta T. And that allows us to make a very direct prediction, right? Because if you think that the dynamics is not perfect, and that it is controlled by local barriers, then it must be the case that the change of activation energy is just given by this shift. And that's a prediction that now we will be able to test without hitting bounds. We predict how the change of activation energy will take place, knowing how much local barriers change energy. And we can do that without hitting bounds. So what you can measure is the dynamics. So I find numerically into two grids. And it's related to activation energy. And essentially, you can invert this expression. It's not completely obvious because here you have a fitting parameter of 0, and we actually directly go and measure it. Next slide, we'll see how we do it. But it's our question, and then of course I will be happy to measure it because I think it could be an experiment to get that. So what you see is again temperature. And what you see on the y-axis is the change of activation energy as measured from the dynamics with some reference that we take from. Okay? So the black points here are just from the true measure of activation energy change in the liquid. Take the liquid and you measure the activation. And in blue, you have the prediction coming from the measure of the density of states, which is I told you on the last time. And what you see, and you don't have to fitting parameter. You have that where you have no fitting parameter, and what you find is that the agreement is actually extended. I mean, it breaks down at large temperature where it should, because at large temperature, metastable state won't tell you much about the fitting parameter. So that suppose that in this system, broadly for the distal particles, really what's controlling the dynamics is not the fact that it's becoming more and more co-creative, that you have to jump over more and more barriers, but the fact that each barrier are growing. Okay, so what it means equivalently that we can predict the dynamics if we measure local barriers. Again, here we have to, if you tell me, for example, at this temperature, this is the time scale, I take it information. Then I can predict how the dynamic would change and the activation of it would change. So the blue squares are prediction compared with the dynamics. So this is the alpha, this is the relaxation time scale on the log scale as a function of 1 over the temperature. So here you see actually our study of the dynamics, we can change it by 98. And again in blue, we have our prediction knowing the local value. And those colored plots are a way to extract 0, and that's by doing some very fast heating or cooling of system and setting the dynamics in response to that. But so that's the first part of the talk. That's the fact that you measure the energy associated with barriers, and it's just you compare it with the activation energy and you find nothing else. So the second part of the presentation is, if it is like that, how do we understand actually why there is a growing dynamical length? And these are contradictions there. So let's first think about some models and then build some theories that are more general and that we can compare, for example, with the car dynamic simulation. So I'm going to introduce some elastoplastic models that are very popular to think about the plasticity of a solid. It's a mesoscopic description. Each part of the material, think of it as a block, and it has some energy EI that describes the height of the local part. And the dynamic is very simple. There is this guy, I mean, each block can spontaneously relax with a time scale which is exponentially energy. But when it does, first of all, it's going to change restructure, so this EI will change, but also it's going to give a kick of stress elsewhere in the system that will therefore also change the energy of the block. And those systems have been studied today at zero temperature, and they, in particular, they avalanche type response. So if you blow them, you can have a sequence of elastic instability starting from one event and can be followed to the Now you can also study them at finite temperature. And the first thing is that if you study the dynamics, indeed their dynamics is controlled by local variables. And in fact, for those models, what one needs to consider is exactly the quantity I told you about the density of variables. And what happens to those models at very small temperature, you essentially create a gap, it's smoothed by some amount when you open up the temperature, but essentially something that's close to nothing and then the vertical distribution. That's quite similar to what I found in the price too, right? That's essentially nothing and something else. And in those models, if you know this density, then essentially this P star controls the dynamics. So the dynamics is controlled by local variables. And still, as Ozawa and Jeremy found, they simulated dynamic models, and they found that, okay, then you have to wait that it starts again, but essentially, if you look at the configuration in blue, nothing has happened, and then in red, you show regions that are relaxed, and you will see that you have dynamic resonance. And so what we did with them is the theory of that. What's actually going on? And I will do this in 2 slides, so I just give the physics idea and then the scaling result at the same time. What happens essentially in these models is that, okay, imagine that you start from a quiet state like that, the density of the barriers at that time. If you wait long enough, one of these guys will go burst and become unstable in the speed of question. Now, when it does so, it can lead to direct instability, sites nearby that are unstable, okay, that can always happen. But it does something else, which is very important to notice. That it can also bring other sites into this forbidden gap region. So in this region, your elasticity is stable, you're not going to break immediately, but you will be activated much faster than the first. Okay? So you can have a very slow avalanche, we call it the thermal avalanche, and it's going to grow. And what would limit its size is that elsewhere in the system, you can have other mutation spots, and when they emerge, you essentially lose the correlation. So this is the key physical idea. Now, you just get those results. You get that in this viewpoint, there is a length scale that's diverging at 0 temperature and a very low temperature. And this exponent mu, we can relate it completely to 0 temperature properties of the system. You can predict it to know the system has problem. So that's the drawing line scale. It means follow of temperature in this logarithmic in time scale, but qualitatively consistent with observation. But now we can make a new prediction that's more refined. We can also think about what happens, given the temperature, what happens in time. So those are molecular simulation by Berthet and coworkers, where you start from a low temperature system, and then again everything is improved except the red region, which means they are relaxed. And you can look at how, and then look at that, how the length scale of those object grows as you wait more and more.
Matthieu,
Yes.
online audience.
All right.
Would rather you stayed there.
Okay. Okay. So so the tables are actually the MD root data. And tonight our prediction. We predict that avalanches they grow logarithmically slowly in time. And we don't have this exponent mu is fixed. The only thing we don't fix is the prefactor. So if you fit one symbol equal to a line, then you really completely predict the relativity line. And so it works very well. So it seems like at least for this system, okay, so good and this relation are again for the probably for these first parts where you can swap them. But for those kind of systems, it seems that the notion that local variables control the dynamic not only give you the equation energy, but also appears to predict quantitatively going dynamical heterogeneities. So I want to add one slide on soft matter, more soft matter thing. Essentially, what we are forced to think about is so avalanches are classical concepts, the sequence of relativity studies. So here you have to think about the competition between system of mechanical noise and the spontaneous noise, which is exogenous. In our case, the temperature, but it's more general. And what we're describing is shaped by those two effects. And I think this would be much more general. So just when we started to present those works, at the same time, there is a group in Israel which has beautiful data on crumpling of paper. And so you know they just got away and they listen to the paper. And it's sending some visual sounds. And what you can measure as a function of the time you waited in this experiment, you can measure the time interval between the paper damaging and emitting sound. And what you find is that the system becomes very slow. I mean, you have to wait ages when you hit those 2 points, you really have to wait a long time. What you see here is that those 2 points, you see visually, have some sort of cluster where they align and form this line. So it means that you have in the system precisely what I'm describing. Avalanches are very slow events. So here we think it's not really temperature, it's more the sort of vibration in the room. But I think this concept would be used when you think about creep of amorphous solids or friction, things like that. Okay, so I will conclude. Maybe repeat the talk for those who's online. So we have direct evidence for a model where we can simulate at one time. That it's not about cooperative effects, but what's going on in dynamics. But it's about local files. So we propose a new theory for dynamical heterogeneities, really based on the notion of the classical notion of avalanches, but shaped by exogenous noise. And one question I didn't touch, and I think it's an important one, is really what's causing these local bias to grow. And often it has been thought that maybe it's because local elasticity grows, then you would have to understand why local elasticity grows. Some people propose that you have local unstable structure or exotic ordering appearing. We think it has to do with our way of thinking that has to do more with actually the description of liquids, mud coupling, dynamical condition, and that new theory should be interpreted in terms of what they tell us about the architecture and energy. So I would be happy to take questions. Obviously, one question is how universal is that? I mean, the second part of the talk is the theory. One can go and try to test it in any model, but the first part is the fact. It's the fact that for a given model, it's a model where particles are quite very dispersed. You have some particles moving faster than others. But in real life, you have many systems like that. I mean, you have multi-species, metallic glass goods where it's known that some particles diffuse more than others. Even in silica glass, oxygen diffuse faster. And those systems, as those molecular, this numerical model, they capture the key factors of that. So they hope that it would be quite generic for those. I do think that if you look at physics, there's certainly other things can happen, liquid phase function, things like that. So I would be happy to take questions. And I apologize for the online.
Oh,
So I'm trying to understand your low avalanche coming from temperature and what happens to temperature. So what have you done to the zero temperature avalanche?
So it's actually the zero plus the constant, so there is a strong connection with the zero. So normally when you think about avalanches, yes, you would have something like that where you have tide and you have an even stability. But at zero temperature, this curve is easily point, right? And so the only thing that matters is the fact that you have a sequence of steps that go on the left. I mean, here what matters is that they go also on the left, but it means now they're activated. So instead of becoming unstable,
I see.
so here that's not like they're immediately unstable, it's that they relax on the microscopic time scale. If one guy goes here, in fact, it will take ages to relax. So that's why you can have extremely slow but still sequence or avalanche avalanche. And that's what causing this slow growth of avalanche. It's not normally we have follow, you don't have logarithmic growth this time. And that comes from the fact that when you develop very big avalanches, sometimes they will survive and grow just because that guy is close to the so that's changed again. So that completely changed the fit. Yeah, you instead of all dynamics, you have activated so logarithmic dynamics.
And you then rigorously modified this kinetologically models to include temperature. Is that what the theory is?
Well, okay, first we tested theory in electrostatics models where you just have this rule that we developed. You have just some energy, essentially the model I described. You have a relationship between stress and energy. The propagator acts on stress because the computer is shifting the energy. And then you just have to activate the rules.
Okay.
And then, but in terms of theory, if you assume that you have local barriers that are coupled by elasticity, then it's a necessary consequence. And then we can test it outside.
Right, just follow up on that.
Yes.
Is there a sense in that the regions that are activated are nearby or far away, or is that important?
Yeah, I mean, it's okay. So, I mean, many aspects, the exponents that characterize the sort of fractal dimension of this object, we measure them. We don't have, a theory for exponents, except the new, I told you, I mean, yeah, some exponents we know, some exponents we don't. So, so yes, the fact that you have long range interaction instead of short range is affecting this exponent. So that may be a bit technical, but the exponent that governs the growth of the main scale, for those who are aware of that, is related to density singular here. That's an exponent that we call theta that you know very well. And so that's also what controls this how the length goes temperature. And it's really there only because you have long range interaction. So yeah, long range interactions are very important in shaping the geometry of the object.
But then,
I mean, you would still have, if you would have just short range interaction. And in fact, some people looked at this model of traps. The trap model where you talk to the next neighbor. I mean, the expansion will be different as a picture. I mean, so the picture of activated very slow avalanche will still be there, even if you were just getting local interaction. Quantitatively, I mean, they will be different because the big picture is still there.
yeah, because one thing that we struggled with a lot, but we just have the near field sort of facilitation, is time reversal invariance, which is very hard to build in when you have a long range elasticity, right? Because to run the whole thing backwards becomes difficult.
Okay, so
I would.
so I mean, for me, so. You have to say worry. It's not a worry for me. I mean, those events are. I have some worry. Those events are very slow, so the elasticity complicated at times to life before you do anything. I am not sure that's exactly worried. What's for me really what's irreversible, what's put by hand here is just the rule that when one side goes first, it cannot come back. So for me, this is really the critical assumption that this is where the relativity is not really, I'm not sure it's much about the long range, but just the local rule. And in the sort of model, I mean, sort of what we see is liquid is that hey, you have barriers like that, and so typically the excitation barrier are going to say that we go a bit higher. So I think what's happening is that you need, not one, but a few excitations acting together to make something irreversible. But as long as this number needed does not change temperature, that the pitch barrier, what matters is the height of pitch barrier, then don't worry about it. Sorry.
Okay, Peter.
Yeah.
I have a question about your calculation of your density of state,
Yeah.
that's the activation barrier. So if you do your little trigger of temperature and you find a barrier,
Yeah.
okay, now you put in your little potential. Now the next barrier, if it happens far away, that's fine. But then when you get a lot of them, you got a lot of this potential somewhere. So how do you make sure that you haven't frozen out some interesting barriers that would be have taken place?
So,
In the original place where you
so,
put the
right, so. Well, so we worry about that, that's what we see. That's why we try to do the minimal perturbation. And at the end of the day, we also, where it has converged in terms of purity density of state, we have maybe 1 or 200 excitation, and then just 5,000 freedom, so small.
But you check to make sure that you're.
check. So our response to this question was to run the code many more times.
But you can actually go look to make sure that they're far away in space to the ones that you put your potential, right? Because each excitation, you put potential on for the next time you do your temperature jump.
Yes.
That potential is now corrupting the actual potential of the system. And so particles that are in that region are not going to be having the native excitation. So you want to make sure that your new ones are.
Yes, you may certainly, if you have one that's directly there, you may miss it.
Yeah.
One aspect that for us to check how much we need, but we refer to the numeric the second time. But you don't know if you do it in fact, it's a London, so excitation one, excitation one becomes excitation two, so and so what we see that indeed we need some analysis after 10 runs. So even when we go between 10 runs and 20 runs, we need a lot in one run. I mean, this is just for showing. But what seems to appear is that, at some point at low energy, but here we will be 15 layers. But two density.
What I'm worried more about is not missing some, but taking some, which also incorporates the potential that you put in.
Oh no, because once we study that, we remove all it's just a discovery algorithm. Once we know, there's something taking place there, we study the condition in the absence of any added potential. That's very important. That's very important. It's just discover them, then when we study them, we remove all the dirty tricks.
The proof is in the pudding, it's got this very nice collapse. If what's might happen when we put observation on this, but it's got this nice collapse, this is the main mechanism.
But it's still key to remove this potential. I mean, it's still key to remove this potential. Because if I was not removing it, I would generally stiffen the material everywhere.
Okay, thanks very much.